What's going on, guys? Welcome back into the channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about scouting and drafting within MLB The Show 24 and my concise guide as to how to scout a consistently good draft class every single time within franchise mode. If you want to come away with great draft prospects like first round pick Francisco, 77 overall, A potential, second round pick, 62 overall, A potential, Jeff Hamill, or just an overall really solid draft class like this group of A and B potential 18 and 19-year-old players that I've gotten through a couple of combined draft classes with the Rockies, you're going to want to follow this video. We're focusing on young players, we're focusing on high potential players because those are the players that are going to develop the best in franchise mode and in your farm system that are actually going to have a chance to impact your team in the future if you play through a franchise long term. Whenever we first hop into scouting, the first week or two of the season, the first Sunday, you're going to be able to jump into what you want to do with your scouting system. I'm going to try to sway you guys to focus on individual prospects, and I'm going to try to get you guys to focus on your scouts efficiency, your scouts position player rating, and your scouts pitcher rating. I'm not going to be talking much, if at all, about discovery. I would sway you guys to go away from discovery. There are some strategies to utilize different things within franchise mode, and I'm also going to be trying to convince you guys or tell you the successes that I've had and show you how to have success with scouting individual players as opposed to total positions within franchise mode. And because of that, we're going to have to take a look at our scouts first and foremost. When you jump into scouting, you're going to see the different assignments that you can assign to these scouts, and their ability to perform those assignments is going to be based on their scout ratings. So again, like I said, we're going to want to have a scout that is good at scouting pitchers, which means high pitcher rating and high efficiency rating. We're going to want to have a scout that's good at scouting position players and is also efficient. And then we're probably going to want to have a scout that is good at doing both so that they can be flexible to help us sway in one direction or the other, depending on if the draft class is favored towards pitchers or if it's more favored towards position players, or if you specifically want to scout favored towards one direction or the other in any given year. In order to access our actual scouts, we're going to go up to the top right-hand corner of the screen here under the Acquisitions tab and go to Staff Contracts, go to Scouts, and from here, you'll be able to modify which scouts you have in the system. You have a total scouting budget to be able to do this. Depending on which team you start with, you're going to be at a better position. What I want you to focus on, again, is that efficiency rating. A really good scout that I would look to add to my team immediately would be this guy, Mark Waldron, who is 92 efficiency, 90 on pitchers, 98 on position players. That can be our kind of two-way flexible scout. And then I'm going to look for a high efficiency, high effective pitcher scout and a high efficiency, high effective position player scout. And oftentimes you can find those guys that are not necessarily super expensive that are out there, for either of those positions. You usually can find somebody here in the mid 90,000 salary range that is going to have, 90 plus efficiency as well as 90 plus effectiveness at one of those positions. So then when we actually get into the meat and potatoes of our scouting, we'll be able to assign our scouting accordingly. What I'm going to do is spread these guys out depending on what you want to draft or what I see is good within the draft class. And I'm going to scout around my draft picks. So as the Pirates here, I have pick 9 in the first round, pick 36 in the first round, and then pick 46 in the second round. And that's what I'm going to look at first and foremost. I'm going to try to make sure I get a good player at pick 9. I'm going to try to make sure I get a good player at pick 36, and then maybe make sure I get a good player at pick 46, because that's where things get a little bit more murky and you're taking more shots in the dark and things can kind of go off the board in franchise mode. But you can pretty much guarantee that you'll end up with a player that you scout at pick 9 and pick 36 that are projected around that area, or that you have scouted, as a later projected player that turns out to be good once you scout them. Anyway, I'm not going to focus on the players that are, pick 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those players are generally not going to fall to my position at pick 9. And I'm probably not going to focus on like closing pitchers and relief pitchers just because they're not super high value. So what I'm going to start doing is looking at players that are closer to my pick that I might be able to draft. So David Spillane here is probably the first player that I would scout, and I would scout until I found a couple of players that I really like at this position in the draft. That way I know that at pick 9, I'm getting a solid player. I'm probably getting an A potential high overall player. Likewise, I'm going to do the same thing for pick 36. So once I have pick 9 down, I'm then going to skip forward. I'm probably not going to care too much about pick 20 through 25 or 30. Then I'm going to start scouting players that are potentially going to be available around pick 36 until I have kind of a variety of players there that I'm comfortable drafting at or around pick 36. Now, as an overall strategy, and what I start to transition to once I get to round 2, is looking at 18-year-old players only. Sometimes 19-year-old players, but primarily only 18-year-old players. In the first round, that's not as important because a lot of these older players at the top end of the first round are going to be higher overall players. And so you can get away with scouting some of these 22 or 21-year-old players because they might be able to play for your team immediately. However, once you get past round 1, most of those players are gone. And so anybody that has high potential is going to be 60s or lower. And so that's why you start to look at 18-year-old players that are going to have high-end potential. So if I'm looking at pick 46, for example, I'm going to be scouting guys that are 18 years old and are projected, 90 plus potential. Henry Keith is an interesting prospect here because he has that 58 to 92 potential. Not as high as I would like it, but he has 62 to 96 potential overall, which could be really good. That means he could be coming in as a really high overall player. The type of player that I am typically looking at all the way down through round 6 is going to be these 18-year-old players that have 65 to 99 potential. A great example of a player that I would stay away from would be a starting pitcher like Ramon Francisco. In past years, I might have told you, yeah, go ahead and scout this guy. But I've learned that that's not necessarily an efficient way to do things because at 23 years old, he's never going to really reach the MLB level for us, even if he has a potential. It looks great because he has 81 and 95 potential, but at 23 years old, we know that he's probably a 50-something overall player based on that overall range and based on him being a not ranked draft prospect. Chances are very unlikely of him being able to impact our team in any significant way in the long run. However, what you will find a lot of times towards the end of the rankings are players like Willie Rodriguez, and once you scout them, they turn out to be really high-end potential players. This guy is 18 years old, 65 to 99 potential, and unfortunately his overall looks like 27 to 61, but he's a not ranked prospect. A lot of times that overall is going to be higher for rounds 2 through 3, 4, 5. So in general, this is the type of player I'm telling you to look at though. 18 years old and potential of 65 to 99. Sometimes you'll find players that are 18 years old that have 75 to 99 potential or something around there. These are the players you want to focus in on. By the time you get to the draft, you're only going to be able to scout about 21, 22, maybe 23 individual players based on this strategy. And so you want to make sure that you're scouting as many of these 18-year-old up to 99 potential players as possible, because you will come away having scouted some of these guys that don't have good potential at all. But if you scout enough of them, you're going to find a really good number of these 18-year-old guys that have high B into A potential that are going to develop well in your organization and turn into valuable assets and impact players for your team. You can get away with scouting some of the players that are 19 years old and have similar potential ranges Just know that your most valuable prospects are going to be 18 years old because of the development time frame with those players. But the main tip that you then want to add on to this is that you're going to want to set your positional needs to what you're scouting for that week. So this is a week by week thing. This week I'm scouting a second baseman, starting pitcher, and first baseman. So I'm going to switch it to first base, second base, and starting pitcher. That's going to give you a very small bonus to these players' interest once they've been contacted by the team. As you can see, the first week of scouting on these guys, you're contacting the agent to learn the player's interest. That interest will come in higher to begin with if you have set them as a positional need. It is not foolproof. Sometimes you will still struggle to sign players after the draft, even if you've done this, but it does give you a slight edge, a slight benefit in doing that more efficiently. So I definitely recommend doing that. And shout out to all the guys in the comment section that have left that comment over this year, because that is a really helpful tip. You're then going to scout these guys 2 weeks in a row and then move on. Most of the time it's 2 weeks in a row. Sometimes these players are going to come in scouted a little bit slower, especially depending on your scouts and whatnot. Sometimes they'll be scouted a little bit faster. Your goal is to scout these guys to 90% and above. You do not have to get them to 100%. You do not have to scout them to 100% plus one additional week. The reason that a lot of people say that you should do that is because then you can get guaranteed information on whether a player is good or not. That is effective, especially if you want a really good first round or second round pick. But then you're going to be taking a lot of shots in the dark for the rest of your draft class. So if you want to focus on your first couple of rounds and make sure you just get a couple of really solid players, then yeah, scout them to 100% plus one additional week, and then you'll know the exact ratings of those players pretty much. However, if you want to get a broad coverage and come away with a consistently good draft class across the board, then make sure you are scouting players across the board that match up with your draft picks all the way down through the bottom of the draft, and make sure that you are only scouting them 90% and above, because it is going to give you enough information to consistently come away with solid players. Sometimes I will warn you that if you scout a guy to 90%, they could still be a bust for you. You could still think a guy's good and he could come out with a lower overall or a lower potential than you expected. But 99% of the time, if you have scouted them to 90% plus, you pretty much know what their potential and overall range is going to be. And if you just take the middle number in between their potential lower end and higher end, and same thing for their overall, if you just take the middle number in there, you're pretty much guaranteed that that's where that number is going to fall. And again, as I showed you at the beginning of the video, I have been coming away with consistently good draft classes across the board. In fact, the last 3 to 4 draft classes that I've had utilizing this exact strategy, I have not come away with a player below B potential, and they've all been 18 or 19 years old. And in the first round, I've pretty much always come away with a higher overall, meaning high 60s into the 70s, with high B or A potential. So you can pretty much still come away with an OP draft class. They have made it a little bit harder this year to scout and draft. They have made it a little bit more hit or miss, but if you follow this strategy, you can pretty much still guarantee yourself a great draft class. And like I said, scout them to 90+%, and then you're going to move on. So essentially what that means most of the time, especially if you've done your scouts correctly, is that you're going to scout your players 1 week, you're going to scout them a second week, and then you're going to move on to somebody else. You're going to scout 1 week, scout a second week, then you're moving on to somebody else. And then you follow that all the way through, and then you're just going to draft players based on the strategy that we showed to you. The one note that I want to give you about the draft is that you want to prefer drafting players that are already projected over drafting players that are projected lower. So as an example, if you scout a non-ranked player and you find out that he's really good and he's probably a first-round player, but you also have like a second round and a first round player that are scouted that are going to be pretty good, that maybe not as good as that unranked guy, you're going to want to draft the guys that are scouted as first or second round players first, because that non-ranked guy will probably be there in round 2, and you can get both of them. If you take the non-ranked guy in round 1, chances are those other 2 players that were already projected good, not going to be there in round 2 for you. Make sure that you create a save point before the draft, create a save point after the draft, create save points as you go through your signing process. Do not skip your signing process. It's like every 2 days here in the second half of July, you're able to sign your prospects, and you add progression to the amount of interest that they have signing with your team. Set it to auto, that's fine. Create a save point on or around July 31st or August 1st, which is the last day to sign your players. Make sure that you have a save point to go back to. And I'm only saying this in case you royally screw something up. Again, with the draft, with signing, with all that stuff, make sure that you create save points so that you can save yourself in case you royally mess something up. Trust me, I've done it. I've heard other people do it. It stinks to mess it up and just maybe not even sign your first or second round draft pick because you overlooked the signing period or something like that. And then you'll be able to see what your players' actual ratings are whenever you get to August 2nd. And that's it. That's literally everything you need to know in terms of scouting, drafting, and signing your players within MLB The Show 24. And that is how to come away with a consistently good draft class every single time within franchise mode. Trust me, you're going to come away with the Francesco Franciscos and the Jeff Hamels in the first and second round if you follow this consistently. Again, don't get so bogged down in scouting first round prospects and second round prospects and making sure that you know everything about them, and then you don't have anybody to scout in the later rounds. Then you're never going to come away with, you know, some of the A and B potential players that could be good for you towards the end of the draft. You're never going to come away with an Alex Reese as an example. You guys can come away with really awesome draft classes by being able to scout these guys at 18 years old, 19 years old. Don't be afraid to spread out your scouting like that. And like I said, don't focus on discovery and don't focus on scouting positions as a whole. I just find it to be much less effective, and you're not going to come away with these types of players. But I would like to hear in the comment section down below if you have a different strategy, what it is, and how does it work for you, and you know, how well do you draft? What are your players like when you draft? I'm curious to hear that. If you do use this, let me know. If this helps you in some way, please come back and leave a comment on this video. I'd love to hear about it. I'm curious to hear what you guys do for scouting and drafting in MLB The Show 24. Make sure you guys leave a like down below on the video, comment, as I said, and subscribe if you're new around here. As always, I'll see you in the next video, and I hope you have a good one.